What's going on, everybody? It is your boy Zamboni. I'm a musician and astrologer, and it is time to talk about the astrology of the week ahead. As always, I thank you so very much for checking out ZamboniPhone.com, where you can find all of the things. You can find the music there. You can get a reading there. You can get involved. You can check out the podcast there. There's like a whole bunch of stuff, cool stuff that you can find. You can get some merch. There's a whole bunch of really nice artwork for wall hangings and sweatshirts and all the rest of that. There's all sorts of stuff you can do there. Thank you for hitting up my Venmo, Cash App, PayPal. If this kind of content is helpful for you and you like it, then I would love if you would send me $2 or $5. It's super, super helpful. Thank you so much for doing that. Thank you for sending this to a friend. Thank you for watching this all the way to the end. Thank you for hanging out with me for years and years. I've been doing these forecasts for like 6 years now or something like this. And I super appreciate everyone who has come along with me. Thank you for being here. Let's talk about the astrology of the week ahead. So this week we are still feeling the Scorpio vibes this week. So the sun is in Scorpio, Mercury's in Scorpio, Mars is in Scorpio. Mars rules Scorpio. All of these folks are opposite to Jupiter this week. And so, you know, whenever I'm thinking about folks who are making a Jupiter aspect, Jupiter tends to want to improve things or make things better or make things stronger in some kind of way. To my mind, this really looks like, okay, so let's think about it for a second. So we've got Mars and Mercury in Scorpio, and they're going to conjoin this week. So Mercury is going to catch up to Mars, and they are going to conjoin basically at the same time that they oppose Jupiter. So this looks really good for the Mars things, for the Scorpio things. When I think about Scorpio, I think about precision attack, right? There's something about like going straight for a certain spot, you know, like scorpions have a needle, right? And so it's about getting that one spot and puncturing deeply, right? And that's what that's what Mars in Scorpio really likes to do. To have Mercury here very much speaks to doing that in the field of communication, right? Like eviscerating someone with a comment or with an insult or something like that. You know, Scorpio is, you know, it's associated with vengeance and like waiting for the right moment or the right opportunity to strike and to do great damage by doing that. Jupiter here, in opposition to Jupiter, you know, Jupiter usually wants to be nice and to like help to improve things. In this case, it looks like Jupiter wants to improve the efficacy of the attack. So I wouldn't expect Jupiter to be like particularly peaceable this week, because we can see that there's like this strong Mars influence going on here. Now, one thing that I think is really interesting here that might be good for strategic purposes, which is what I always want to do whenever I'm looking at the astrology. That's why I do the forecast in the first place, is for like in order to develop a strategy for working with the week. But then also Scorpio loves a good strategy. Scorpio loves to be in a place where we know what's happening and then things sort of like go out according to plan and this sort of stuff, right? And so I sometimes like to think about Scorpio as like the puppet master, like being behind the scenes and like pulling the strings and this sort of thing. One of my favorite images for Scorpio is the First Lady, right? Who ostensibly doesn't have that much power, but who also runs a lot of shit from behind the scenes. Like the president can only do whatever he thinks is necessary, but like if the First Lady is around and is not approving of that shit, then that's not gonna fly. You know what I mean? Right? So like there's somebody who's like actually in charge, but who isn't the head of state. That's how I like to think about Scorpio a lot. And so this is Mars's sign, but it's Mars's water sign, right? So Mars also has a sign in Aries, and so that's Mars's fire sign. This is very like guns blazing, like shoot fire, like straight ahead, you know, like get into the battle and just like swashbuckling, that sort of thing, right? Whereas Scorpio is going to be more like poison them or wait till the cover of night or something like this, right? So this is interesting, especially because Mercury is here as well, right? So Mercury, one thing that I think Serapio says in about Mercury in a water sign is that Mercury is mute in this placement, that Mercury like doesn't, so Mercury tends to prefer the air and the fire signs. There's this sort of like, it's chatty, it's sort of like big and up and out and like wants to do a lot of talking and this sort of stuff. Mercury in Scorpio does less talking, and that is an important power play, right? So this gets into the whole like, it's better to be quiet and be thought a fool than it is to open your mouth and to remove all doubt, right? I think that's a Mark Twain quote. And so it's in that sort of space, especially if there's somebody around you who is running their mouth, then like loose lips sink ships, right? So there might be some kind of information that will come out if you just stay quiet and keep your ears open. If your ears are open, then you might come into some information which may help to give you a leg up, some kind of like, power play situation that you can work with. This is interesting as well because we can notice that Venus is in Virgo. And so Venus in Virgo is going to make a trine to that Jupiter in Taurus. And so Jupiter in Taurus, who like wants to bring benefit or improvement or whatever, and is ruled by Venus. Venus in Virgo is like really cares a lot about the details and about the like little pieces that make all the things work. And so to see this going on here, and so this is Venus in Virgo is also making a sextile to all of the Scorpio planets that are making this opposition to Jupiter. There's like a detail here. There's a critical piece that seems like it wants to become available this week that might be really strong for generating some kind of strategy or something like this. So on the one hand, it definitely looks like there's an opportunity to eviscerate opponents under this kind of sky, especially by maybe discrediting them in some kind of way or saying something about them that would like that would freak out the situation, or like there's an opportunity to Mercury Mars here, right? Like to bring fighting words or to say something that can cause the opponent some kind of destruction. Or also, you can listen, because Mercury in a water sign is very good at listening. This is a very good situation for like noticing what's going on around you, being aware, and taking in information, and by gaining information, then getting a leg up on whatever's going on here. So opponents, Mercury and Mars love to be like in some kind of a opposition or some kind of competition with the others. Even Mercury in the Hellenistic tradition is associated with wrestling. There's a competitive element there that like Mercury really loves to debate and this kind of thing as well, right? So like Mars is associated with athleticism and the kind of like competition that you sort of expect. But then Mercury, one thing that I've been thinking about a lot recently is like Mercury and Mars and how they interact and how they're the same and how they're different, or are they? Like what's really going on here? So the competitive element is super important here. So it's likely that there's going to be some kind of opposition. There's likely to be some kind of situation where you feel like you're competing with another person, or maybe, like this looks really big for like office politics. If there's some office politics going on and you're like looking around and like there's somebody else who's like been talking a bunch of shit about you, and you've been maybe biding your time and waiting for your moment. Maybe your moment is gonna come up this week. I definitely would suggest biding your time and listening, because it very well could be you who says the thing that leaves the opening for someone else to come and eviscerate you, right? So like that's a real opportunity. That's a real possibility this week. So the opportunity is in being quiet, waiting for your moment, waiting for your opportunity. There's likely to be a window. A window is likely to open up this week. And if you can shoot straight through that window, then you're likely to be able to win your contest. But by just kind of charging in and saying all the things and like going in guns blazing, that is not likely to work this week. So less is more. Make sure you're doing strong listening and make sure that you've got a strong plan or strategy that can take you to where you're trying to go. Thank you so much for rocking with me another time. I'll check y'all next week.